Finally, we take a look at how to mix and unmix liquids at the flick of a switch. Sandrin tells us more. Oil and water don't usually mix, but the new chemical sensitive to light has been added here to blend them together. When exposed to UV light, the chemical changes its structure and becomes soluble in water. This causes two layers to form with the oil floating on top of the water chemical combo. This method should be cheaper than the current alternative, which involves using high-energy centrifuges. An economist sees the world basically through a typical microeconomic toolkit. That involves things like thinking at the margin, rationality, opportunity cost, trade-offs. Economists, like any other discipline, rules, and its own way of seeing the world. So basically, economics, or economists in general, tend to apply microeconomic concepts like that to explain the way humans behave, and to make predictions about the future. I think it's really important for young people not to feel restricted in their choices, and also to be aware of the choices that are available to them. And obviously, the media has an incredibly important role to play in that. I think we tend to talk about science as this big kind of monolith, but of course, actually, it's this beautiful, multifaceted thing. There's almost something for everybody there. And there are so many different aspects of it. Somebody that's going to be attracted to working in biology might be a very different person from somebody who's attracted to engineering. I suppose it's about knowing the breadth of opportunities that are out there, and so anything that universities and broadcast media can do to make sure that those opportunities are visible. Why do we need more entrepreneurs right now? The entrepreneurs who create and run our businesses, who play by the rules, are in fact critical to our success as a nation. We need them especially today. Business, not government, will end this recession. Government must help by creating fair rules, sound monetary policy, and by protecting our fellow citizens in periods when they are jobless. We have to make way for the new entrepreneurial firms that will push us to frontiers of innovation. If sea levels continues to rise, eventually the property becomes inundated, and the real value of the property, the vast bulk of its value, will be in the value of the land, which of course is then unusable. And that's of course not insured by property insurance. Landowners and banks and other financial institutions that have lent money against the value of those properties are going to find that they suffer very serious losses, and it's not at all obvious at the moment who would compensate them. Christine Jones. Rebuilding carbon-rich agricultural soils is the only real, productive, permanent solution to taking excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Pip Courtney. She's frustrated that scientists and politicians don't see the same opportunities she sees. Christine Jones. This year, Australia will emit just over 600 million tons of carbon. We can sequester 685 million tons of carbon by increasing soil carbon by 0.5% on only 2% of the farms. If we increased it on all of the farms, we could sequester the whole world's emissions of carbon. These two paintings, both called sunflowers, are generally accepted as the finest of several depictions of the thick-stemmed, nodding blooms that Van Gogh made in 1888 and 1889 during his time in Arles. The first is now in the collection of the National Gallery in London, and the second is in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. Van Gogh referred to this work as a repetition of the London painting, but art historians and curators have long been curious to know how different this repetition is from the first. Should it be considered a copy, an independent artwork, or something in between? An extensive research project conducted over the past 3 years by conservation experts at both the National Gallery and the Van Gogh Museum has concluded that the second painting was not intended as an exact copy of the original example, said Ella Hendricks, a professor of conservation and restoration at the University of Amsterdam, who was the lead researcher on the project.
There are some 250 million cars in America, 250 million cars in the country with just over 300 million people, and most of those vehicles, of course, are gas-powered. This poses a huge challenge given the limited supplies of oil and the growing urgency of the global warming crisis. But there is good news, according to our guests today, and that is we have the know-how and the technology to build sleek, fast automobiles that don't use gasoline. These vehicles of tomorrow are powered by hydrogen, electricity, biofuels, and digital technology, and they already exist. So what's stopping us from putting them on the roads? Our guests today will help answer that.
Obviously, this is all relevant to your final assignment, so we're going to talk about it. So until today, we've gone through face-to-face interviews as the main sort of part of interviewing the window. Today we're going to have a look at going to use an email and why they work, why they don't necessarily work, and what are the challenges and some of the things that we need to be understanding, when we are completing such interpreters. So let's start with the 4-in-1. Obviously, there are a few benefits to them, and they are listed there up on that slide. It's obviously less stressful for those of you who might be a little bit anxious about interviewing.
Dogs aren't just man's best friend. Previous studies have shown that kids with dogs are less likely to develop asthma. Now a new study may show how, if results from mice apply to us. The work was presented at a meeting of the American Society for Microbiology. The study tests what's called the hygiene hypothesis. The idea is that extreme cleanliness may actually promote disease later on. Researchers collected dust from homes that had a dog. They fed that house dust to mice. They then infected the mice with a common childhood infection called respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV.